Welcome back to the Real News Network Webathon. I'm Paul Jay in Washington, and we're about to close out the evening with one final question about the Real News. Although if you really want to get a question in about the Real News, you could call right now, 888-816-8867. And if you call in the next 4 or 5 minutes, then we can work in maybe one more question. Otherwise, we can do it tomorrow night. Again, we're trying to raise $200,000 by the end of December 9th. This funds about 4 months of our operations. We are getting close. I think we maybe have passed the 160 mark tonight, so we're really making excellent headway. And we very much want to thank everyone who's donated tonight and before tonight. We have a lot of members who've been donating, some of them for years. But if you want to donate, the donate button's here, and don't forget it's a challenge grant, which means for every buck you donate, it triggers another dollar. If you donate $75, not only will you get a film premium, one of our films, which you'll see on our homepage, including films like Return to Kandahar, Machine Gun History Down the Barrel of a Gun, Hitman Heart, Wrestling with Shadows, and the best of the Real News G20 coverage from Toronto. But if you don't do that and donate $75, you'll trigger another $75 and get us closer to that 200,000 mark. And of course, we hope we surpass the 200,000 mark, because that's, as I say, only just barely 4 months of the current operation. We need to expand what we're doing. And not only that, we need to do it for more than 4 months. So the giving generously will be most appreciated. If you want to phone your donation at 888-499-6772. Again, 888-499-6772. And so let me fix this earpiece here. So one question, which I thought was a really excellent question, and something we talk about, and an issue that's faced us right from the beginning of the Real News. And I'm actually going to read this question out because I think it's particularly good. It's from Matt, although I'm not sure where Matt's from, but maybe somebody can tell me. But anyway, Matt writes, I respect the need for the Real News to be independent, but I'm wondering what the relationship is of the Real News, I wonder what the relationship the Real News envisages, I've been at this for 4 hours, I can't get all these words out of my mouth now. Envisages, I can't get it out. Envisions, how's that? I'll make the word simpler. With the social movements. For example, could the Real News highlight videos from the workers and social movements themselves? Thank you for all your great work. So this is an interesting question for us at the Real News, because many of us have either been, before we were journalists, involved in one social movement or the other. And what attitude do we take towards social movements, particularly if there's social movements that privately or individually we support? And then the second part is, to what extent can we feature videos created by the social movements? So let me deal with the second one first, because that's an easier one. We have a Best of the Web section already, and it's kind of for that purpose. We're happy to promote or to play videos that have a less, what can I say, journalistic criteria to them. They can be a little more advocacy. They can be a little bit more in the realm of a very particular point of view that represents a social movement. We still want them to be fact-based, in our opinion. They can't just be, propaganda. But that area is an area Best of the Web, and if you look down on the homepage, you'll find Best of the Web, and you'll also find some political satire, and you'll find other categories. We have one on a selection of videos on climate change and environmental issues. So that we will do, and we can do more of that. In terms of our own work, we see our roles very specifically as being that of journalists, not in the abstract, because we don't think there's such a thing as journalism for everybody, in a sense. We do believe there's in this society there are elites and there are non-elites, and you could actually analyze the class stratification more specifically. But we're not doing news for the elites. We're doing news for ordinary people, because that's who we are. So while we are very careful about being journalists, we want to base what we do on facts. We think all the rigors of professional journalism apply to us. We address ourselves to the questions and concerns of ordinary people. We take up issues now that we think affect ordinary people. Now, one final point. We think people who are involved in fighting for change are news. If there's a movement to organize unorganized workers, or if there's a movement to do with the issue of green and the environment, if there's an issue to do with fair trade issues, a whole range of social issues, whether it's immigration or civil rights or other kinds of questions, people who are not political elite, people who are not near the White House, mainstream media defines them as not news, that if you're not about to be able to be in power, you're simply not newsworthy. Well, we don't agree with that. We want to redefine what's news and what's a newsmaker. If you're fighting for change, you're news. If you're involved in a social movement and that social movement is mobilizing people towards change, that's real news. And what I mean by real, not just because we have some personal sympathy for it, but just because mainstream media defines it as not of real significance, it doesn't mean in a more objective way it's not significant. And one good example of that is if there really was a movement to organize hundreds of thousands of workers, for example, into unions, that would have enormous social significance. If some of these movements that dealing with immigration, when hundreds of thousands of people get mobilized, that's not just a one-day news story. The issue of people organizing for immigration reform should be an ongoing, regular story, as much of, or frankly more than, I'm sorry, this thing in my ear is driving me crazy, more than this ongoing coverage of every innuendo and nuance of politics in Washington, when so little really changes in Washington. Some of these social movements, in any real objective way, if they take on any momentum, have more social importance than what's going on in Washington. Our main problem is just lack of resources. Like, we should have a producer that does absolutely nothing but cover social movements. Should have a producer that does absolutely nothing but cover the environment and climate change issues. We need more specialization. So it all comes back to we need more money. But in terms of our relationship to social movements, our fundamental point is we think that's real news. So if you want to support us, there's donate buttons, and the phone number again is 888-499-6772. Thank you very much for joining us on the first night of the Real News Webathon. Please join us for tomorrow night. A fascinating lineup, both Wednesday night and Thursday night. We're going to start off tomorrow night with a panel discussion which has to do, we're calling is the free internet dead? Amazon took down WikiLeaks, and just because of some political pressure. What does that mean? If you extend that principle, what does that mean in terms of broadcasting, what we do? I mean, if someone leans on some ISP or where our server is located, or who provides us bandwidth, is that going to mean someday if they get leaned on, they can stop the Real News? It's a very serious question. So we're going to kick tomorrow evening off with that. So once again, thank you to everybody that donated. And thank you again for joining us on the Real News Network Webathon.